Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into something that honestly looks like a massive win at first glance. You see this headline: Jonathan Anderson's Dior Men's Summer 2026 show. It pulled in an incredible 1 billion views.
1 billion? Just let that number sink in for a second.
It's huge. Dior shared this with WWD Women's Wear Daily, the big industry paper, and statistically, it puts this fashion show up there with things like Titanic or Gone with the Wind.
Or even a World Cup final.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Apparently even beat the Super Bowl viewership. So, the automatic reaction is just, wow. Applause.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? Okay, brand breaks the internet, reaches everyone, job done. Clear victory.
Right.
But, and this is the twist we're exploring today, while it looks like this amazing victory, there's a really insightful thinker, Marc Abergel, who looks at luxury and culture.
Okay.
And he argues this exact achievement is actually a strategic warning.
A strategic warning. Wow. Okay, that's definitely not the first thing that comes to mind.
Not at all.
So that's what we want to unpack today. We're going to explore Marc Abergel's arguments, his points about how chasing this kind of mass attention might actually dilute what makes luxury. Yeah, luxury. What makes it desirable.
Exactly. We'll get into his ideas on value, this concept he calls cultural sovereignty, and, what he thinks luxury storytelling should really be about going forward.
And this isn't just for fashion buffs, right? It's really about looking past the big, shiny numbers.
Absolutely. It's inviting you, the listener, to think about what actually creates that deep connection, that resonance, especially now when everything is just content, instant access everywhere.
It makes you question what success even is in this landscape.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so first, let's just appreciate the scale here. 1 billion views.
Yeah.
Dior apparently got there through, a whole bunch of things, right?
Yeah, it wasn't just one video stream. They mentioned teaser films, podcasts, even using Instagram's close friends feature.
Which is interesting because that's usually for a smaller, more select group, isn't it?
Exactly. So that's a bit of an intimacy play there. But then they also had this Parisian bar event that drew over 1,000 people. So it was this whole multi-layered thing.
A whole ecosystem.
Pretty much an undeniable digital achievement. I mean, think about it. A Dior fashion film becoming one of the most watched films ever. It's kind of staggering when you put it next to blockbuster movies.
It really is. You could absolutely call it an unqualified success based on those numbers alone.
But is it really unqualified? And that's where Marc Abergel comes in with this piece. Dior's 1 billion views is a strategic warning, not just a victory.
Right. So what's his main thrust? What's the core argument?
His central point is pretty direct, he says. In chasing mass attention, luxury Maisons are surrendering the very aura that makes them desirable.
Okay, surrendering the aura.
Yeah, and he defines luxury really nicely, I think. He says it's about distance between the ordinary and extraordinary, that it's meant to be meaningful, exclusive, and that's where desire actually comes from.
That makes intuitive sense for luxury, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That aspirational quality, something a bit out of reach.
Precisely. So Abergel's pointing out this paradox. The more visible luxury becomes, the more it risks eroding the very aura that makes it desirable.
So it's like the visibility itself might be the problem. More views doesn't equal more value.
Worse than that, potentially. He argues it risks flattening the value entirely. He says that billion views might be proof of impact, sure, but it may also be the receipt of something surrendered. Cultural sovereignty.
Cultural sovereignty, that's a strong phrase. What does he mean by a brand surrendering that?
I think he means losing control over its own story, its own meaning. Handing the reins over to, the algorithm, the demands of these huge platforms where the goal is just engagement numbers.
Got it.
And a real strength in Abergel's argument, I feel, is how he distinguishes between different kinds of engagement. He warns Dior might be falling into a trap. Confusing attention for affection, reach for resonance, data for desire.
Attention versus affection.
Yeah.
Reach versus resonance. Yeah, those aren't the same things at all.
Not at all. And the deeper danger he points to, becoming loud but emotionally faint. That's the core dilemma. It's not just about getting seen, it's about being felt.
Which brings us to what might have been lost, the cost of going viral like this. Abergel talks about the original show itself, doesn't he?
He does. He paints a picture of Jonathan Anderson staging it as a ritual of intimacy and authorship. He describes a cinematic prelude, a room designed for stillness, garments like whispers. Very intentional.
A ritual of intimacy. That really contrasts with 1 billion views, doesn't it?
Massively. And that's the tension Abergel highlights. He argues that by streaming it instantly to billions without context, without distribution control, without sequence, something sacred may have been lost.
So the instant uncontrolled broadcast diluted it.
That's his take. He goes so far as to say Dior essentially gave away its most intimate rituals and gifted it to big tech's algorithm.
Gifting it to the algorithm. That's quite a statement.
Yeah.
Is he saying the raw power of the artistic event got flattened by the mass distribution?
I think that's exactly it. For Abergel, the real victory wasn't the number. It was the show's ability to create silence.
Silence. In the age of the infinite scroll.
Yeah. He writes, for 75 minutes, from Paris to Tokyo, the scroll stopped. Something rare happened. The audience didn't just watch, they admired. Not with clicks, but with reverence.
Reverence. Wow. You definitely don't see reverence as a metric on YouTube analytics, do you?
Not usually. And Abergel says that reverence happened because the show was authored by Anderson, cinematic, choreographed, mythic. For him, that was the true success.
Not the billion views.
Not the number. He feels framing it just as a billion views, instant access everywhere, while it risks treating the significant cultural moment like just another social media milestone rather than a cultural masterstroke.
Yeah.
Kind of cheapens the artistry involved.
Which leads to this idea of authorship versus algorithm. It's fascinating, especially when you hear about the billions spent by tech and media giants on content.
Right, and Abergel makes this really powerful comparison. He points out that, while Netflix and every big tech and Hollywood studio has spent $100 billion trying to get their 1 billion views, Dior achieved in 75 minutes of cultural authorship.
Wait, say that again? $100 billion versus one 75-minute show.
Yeah, he references these huge figures. Estimates suggest over $170 billion spent on content creation in 2025 by companies like Netflix, Disney, Amazon.
That's insane.
And Abergel's insight is that Dior did something with pure artistry that these giants struggle to engineer even with massive budgets and entire libraries of content.
So it wasn't about optimizing for virality.
He argues Anderson didn't optimize for virality at all. He designed for reverence. The billion views weren't the objective, Abergel says. They were the echo of a cultural shift.
So less of a marketing win and more of a, what do you call it, a cultural coup.
Exactly, a cultural coup. He's really redefining success here. He says Dior didn't just launch a collection, it launched a feeling. Not an ad, not a slogan, but a myth. Something that genuinely moves culture.
Not just product.
Not just product, and he keeps coming back to it. What made it powerful wasn't its volume, it was its authorship. The fact that even in this world of constant noise, like the TikTok feed, it made 1 billion people actually stop, watch, and feel, that, for Abergel, is a sovereign act of meaning. And that's a real strength of his argument, identifying that deeper impact.
Okay, so if the instant mass broadcast maybe wasn't the perfect strategy, according to Abergel, what's the alternative? He proposes a better way, right?
He does. He suggests the future of luxury isn't about going viral, it's about going vertical.
Going vertical, what does that mean in practice?
His core idea is this concept of the private right. He asks, what if that billion-view moment had started differently, not as a huge global broadcast immediately? He suggests maybe a velvet rope live stream shared with its most loyal clients first, before it goes out to everyone else.
Like a tiered release.
Kind of. He thinks luxury houses could tell stories in sequence. Not for exclusion, but for elevation.
Yeah.
It creates layers, it builds anticipation.
Right, starting with loyalty. That feels very luxury. Rewarding the faithful first.
It does, doesn't it? Abergel is really clear. The most sacred moments should begin with its most loyal clients. He paints this picture. Imagine the top Dior clients, the VICs, very important clients, getting the privilege to watch the show before the billion other people do.
Okay, yeah.
He says that's the path to lasting desirability. Maybe they get a personal message from their contact at Dior, a private link, maybe even a little voice note from Anderson himself. No hashtags, no noise, just belonging.
That sounds incredibly exclusive and special.
Exactly. Earned, not advertised, he calls it. Then after that moment, sure, publish it for everyone else and get your 1 billion views. The sequence matters.
And he points to other brands that maybe already do something like this.
Yes, and that bolsters his argument. He notes, that's why Hermès or Chanel almost never live stream their shows to the entire world, just to their Visas.
Right. They are famously more controlled.
Or think about Rolex. Rolex doesn't tweet collections. It lets its ambassadors tell their story. It's more curated. Abergel says their mystery is not a flaw. It's the strategy. Because, he argues, Luxury, at its best, is about story revealed, not dumped. It is whispered to the few before it echoes to the many.
Whispered to the few before it echoes to the many. I like that. So it's about reclaiming that control, that cultural sovereignty again.
That's the core of it. He directly calls for Dior to stop relying and paying on third-party platforms to tell its story. His line is great. If you buy a Dior at Dior, you should watch Dior at Dior too.
Own the experience end to end.
Exactly. Build that verticality, reclaim the narrative. For Abergel, this isn't marketing, it's ritual.
It's a ritual.
Yeah. He warns that when luxury brands treat their storytelling like just another piece of content, like a commodity, they lose authorship. But if they treat it like a ceremonial unveiling, they keep what makes luxury desirable. Control over the tone, the meaning, and, yes, the access.
This really does feel bigger than just fashion, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Why should this conversation matter to you listening right now?
Because I think Abergel's ideas touch on something really fundamental about how we all consume information and what we find truly valuable. He asked us, when desirability becomes freeware, just instantly available to everyone, is it still a gift? Or is it just another download? He says the problem isn't visibility, it's sequencing. We've mistaken views for relevance and scale for success. And that applies way beyond luxury brands. It applies to news, to art, to everything.
It's so true. We are obsessed with reach, with numbers, with scale. Clicks, views, likes. That's the currency. But Abergel's making us ask if that equates to actual value or connection for us personally.
Exactly. He really pushes us to think, the future is not more reach. It's deeper resonance. So, it makes you consider what you value more. Is it getting everything instantly like everyone else? Or is there something powerful in an experience that feels curated, maybe a bit special, something you feel you've earned access to?
Yeah.
He concludes that cultural capital, that real value, must be curated and harvested, not mass distributed. It needs care.
So let's sum this up. Marc Abergel's argument, which is really compelling, is that while Dior hitting 1 billion views with Jonathan Anderson's show was, yes, an incredible display of cultural power and authorship,
Undeniably impressive.
it also acts as this strategic warning sign. His core message: true luxury, maybe true connection in general, thrives on intimacy, on ritual, on careful sequencing first. Build that deeper connection before you broadcast to the entire planet.
It's about that reverence, that loyalty built through deliberate steps, not just chasing the biggest possible number immediately.
Absolutely. And it leaves us, and you, with a really provocative final thought, building on Abergel's idea of cultural capital. In this world that's just fixated on viral reach, what hidden value might you be missing out on by always prioritizing instant, universal access over the unique power of an experience that's maybe more curated, more sequenced, whether that's in luxury or art, or maybe even in your own life and work?
Something to think about. What gets lost when everything is for everyone all at once?